1. So there I, 39 non-binary, was in rural Shaw's. For those not in an area with a Shaw's, it's a standard supermarket with a club that makes things cheaper, which is their way of hiding their markup. Stuff is just cheaper a few miles down the road. Unfortunately, there were a few things I could only get there, like my flavor of lifeblood, caffeine, and food for the dogs. I was using my powered chair, which back then I needed more often. It's an Eagle HD foldable deal, and it works great. I had been hit pretty hard by post-COVID and was very sedentary at that time in my life, along with a pre-existing joint problem. So I'm leaning forward to get a flat of Monster and stick it under my seat on the rack when a woman pushes on my back and says, "I need that, you don't, you're younger." As I was belted in, nothing happened. It was only luck that I was belted in. Usually I would have undone it to pick up something heavy. I sat up and pushed her hands off me, saying, "What the fuck?" And she shakes the back of my chair like it's a dinner chair or something and goes, "You can use the scooter, the chair is better, and I'm old." And she points at the supermarket scooter she is using. I stare at her in total shock for a moment and say, "This is my wheelchair, get away from me." "You can't use personal stuff in supermarkets, give me the chair." She started shaking it with each statement. So at that point I just hit the maximum speed on my power chair and took off, ripping it out of her hands. It was either let go or be dragged on her face because she clearly wasn't super steady and needed a scooter herself. And we're off on the dumbest chase in creation, mostly because supermarket scooters go slower than any other mobility device. I buzzed over to the service desk and cut in line and said, "I'm sorry, I'm really sorry, but there's a woman following me and trying to push me out of my chair and take it." And from behind me I can hear, "Get back here!" and the most wheezy buzz of the slow scooter. In the moment it was really enraging that she was being so entitled and frustrating, and I just wanted to get my dog food and leave. But in memory, it was the funniest thing I've seen. They let me into the little back office area, and they and the whole line of people waiting just sort of watched as she came over. And it took so long. The scooter was so slow, and she's yelling about how I don't need the chair and how she should get it because she's older and more disabled. It takes a full 20 seconds for her to get from one end of the store to the other, and everyone is just staring as she rides full glory at 0.00001 miles per hour, with her face red and her glasses hanging off one ear. She finally gets to the desk, and they calmly explain that the wheelchair isn't store property, and if she tries to steal from another customer, they'll have to call the police. She starts shouting at the employees that she knows full well you can't bring personal equipment into the store, so they're lying. And the other woman behind the counter says with a bit more attitude, "Lady, what do you think we care if you bring a wheelchair into the supermarket?" At this point I think, something either clicked or she just realized that an entire line of people were staring at her, and not kindly. She suddenly asked where to find the artichokes. I almost coughed in my own spit. The worker just stared back and pointed back where the woman had come from and said, "Proteus?" And the woman left. I admit that for the rest of my visit I avoided any aisle she was in because I didn't want her close enough to grab me again. Now I can laugh about it for the absurdist comedy moment it was. In retrospect, I feel like there's a reason here. Like her husband told her they shouldn't buy a thing, like I had, because they're not allowed to be in the supermarket. That's the best answer I can possibly come up with for that wild nonsense. Wherever you are, lady, I hope you bought your own Eagle HD. If you're wondering why I didn't immediately call the cops and have her arrested, have you ever lived in a rural town? It's actually really hard to get the cops to do anything about anything in a rural town for a variety of reasons. Getting cops to arrest an old lady in a small town would be nigh impossible and stupid. They'd be crucified by the public no matter what she was doing. Also, I'm trans. I know a lot of folks aren't and they don't get it, but being trans means not wanting to deal with cops. There's very few narratives where the disabled trans person comes out better than the old lady, who will probably immediately turn sweet and start weeping and sobbing the second someone calls her out. People like to jump to the cops, as if they're a blanket solution for problems, but in the vast amount of interpersonal situations, the cops say, "That's a civil matter." and walk away. I can almost promise you that since she had not actually stolen my chair, they'd have just talked to her and left, even with footage, yes, because that was a funny video, not an actual danger. I didn't call them because that would have been potentially hours around cops, and there were hungry dogs at home. Instead, I chose to stand up for myself by taking the best legal and socially acceptable way out. It's very easy to armchair quarterback someone else's life from the sidelines, but most situations don't end with a verbal or physical confrontation that has swelling orchestral moments and a drop beat on the big punch. Most of them end with annoyance and a sense that my day was disrupted with no resolution. It would be great to give you that resolution, with some badass story of me standing up to a bully, but that's not what actually happened. Instead, it was a really unthinking old lady who just needed to be kept at a distance until she could understand reality. 2. I work as a parts designer at a company that makes bespoke pieces for the furniture trade. We have many different clients, many of which have accounts with us, so they pay monthly invoices. Customers who don't have accounts have to pay for parts up front for obvious reasons, bespoke pieces which can't be resold. Needless to say, brand new clients fall into the pay up front category, but everyone can apply for an account through our finance team should they want to. But they have to fill out a form for various credit checks. Anyway, a man emails me for a quotation on some pieces. He sends drawings but missed off several vital dimensions. I email him back to request them, and because his original email had zero info about him, no location, no contact number, nothing. I also request that he provide this info for potentially sending his invoice and pricing up the shipping. He waits for almost 2 weeks before replying, and still only gave me the missing dimensions. I think, okay, I'll just give him the item prices. So I cost him up and explain shipping will be extra, but I need his details. He replies by thanking me. That's fine, thank you. I think maybe he's going to speak to his people and maybe get back to me, as this is a common occurrence. A couple of weeks pass by, then he emails me, "When will my units be ready?" What the actual fuck? I then politely apologize for any misunderstandings and explain that I didn't realize he was placing a firm order. I then go on to very clearly explain the procedure for our company. Customer details are required. Invoice needs to then be raised and sent. Customer needs to pay. Drawings are then drafted, bill of materials built, order processed, goods made. Shipping or collection is made. Once I sent the email, I shake my head and continue on with other projects. Within minutes he replies with just this: "I confirmed an order in my reply. Please make the units ASAP." Nothing more, no details, no address, no full name. Didn't even specify if shipping was required. I thought about it for a while. I reread the emails between us, thinking maybe I wasn't getting through to him, but it was all very clear and straightforward. I emailed back and explained that I couldn't help him any further without the following procedure. 2 weeks later, he calls our sales team and requests to make a payment, so understandably they are confused because they don't have any invoice documents. So I explain the situation and forward them the email correspondence. The sales team then have to explain everything again and have to literally crowbar the information out of him. They raise his invoice. He only pays part of it and is £70 short. Sales have to chase him for the shortfall. He eventually pays the shortfall. I draft the drawings up to the drawings he sent, and the order is eventually processed. Apparently, he's planning on collecting the goods once they've been built. I know it's not over. I'm expecting him to start demanding free shipping. I also expect he will find fault with the product and try to wrangle a discount, even though we made the product to his exact specifications. In 2023, during a time of budgeting, price hikes, and small companies like ours having to make cutbacks, this fellow thinks I'm going to make over £450 of bespoke parts, just going on his abbreviated name, and a comment saying, "Fine, thank you." Are these people for real? 3. So this happened a few months ago, while I was working retail seasonally. I was working in a garden centre in Ireland. I was the main checkout worker, so I was alone at the checkout. The till area is sort of its own area because, of course, it's a big complex of garden furniture, decor, plants, etc. And to be honest, it can get boring during lulls because there's nothing really to do there as a till worker. So we are allowed to turn on the radio to play music for the day. And in fact, it was something management insisted on. Just easy listening radio so as not to annoy customers, but it made it less boring. I don't know if this is the same elsewhere, but on Irish radio, no matter the station, it's pretty much guaranteed that the radio station will do a newsread every 1 or 2 hours. Usually no political slant on music stations, just a read of the top stories, including on politics. But of course, the newsreaders don't take an opinion on the stories. Well, on this particular day, it was a slow day. It's about an hour before closing, and I'm sort of just passing time listening to the music when the 5 o'clock newsread plays. Very basic stuff, crime, traffic, etc., except for the last story, which is about a policy the government was considering at the time, which would put more restrictions on people protesting outside hospitals that offer abortion services. Now, a quick side note, both on my beliefs and Ireland, I am vehemently pro-choice and have campaigned for choice before, but of course, I would never get into debates with customers because A, it's not worth my time, and B, it's really not the appropriate space. And for some context on Ireland, as a country with a deeply Catholic history, we only very recently managed to turn the tide on our abortion laws, with 2018 being the year we voted to repeal the amendment of our constitution that banned it. But as I say, not worth my time to debate this at work. And to be honest, not really worth it to debate it here because, as I say, the position you or I have isn't important here. This news story was literally just about a proposal the government was vaguely considering at the time. Well, this story plays, and it ends with a statement from someone, I think a hospital worker, in which they say the protesters outside the hospital are a little disruptive and intimidating to patients. Now, I cannot stress this enough. The channel was not taking a position. It was just talking about the policy and got a statement from someone affected by the protesting. Well, this Karen, I want to say late 40s to early 50s, but typically wealthy Irish Range Rover driver, comes in and immediately says, practically shouts, "How can you listen to those lies all day?" At this point I'm dumbfounded, because I was only vaguely listening to the news. I was beginning to clean up for the day because I didn't want to hang around after closing. The conversation was as follows, as much as I can remember. "What?" "You heard me. How can you listen to those lies all day?" "I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you mean." "Those lies on the radio. You know, it would really put me off coming in here. People are allowed to be pro-life." Ignoring the abortion issue because it's not exactly the thing I want to talk about right then. "Oh, I don't control the radio." "Well, that radio news is all lies. You should turn it off. It's really off-putting to customers. Anyway, 3 bags of soil." "My manager chose the station, I'm sorry, but you'll have to take it up with her. So 3 bags of soil?" "You know, I actually won't come back in here if I hear that again. It's not acceptable to be playing those lies to your customers." "Right, do you want your soil or not?" She's getting annoyed that I won't engage with her. "Yes, but I'll be complaining to head office." And I tell her the price. She paid, then left in a huff. I called one of the guys to help her with her stuff, sent her out to wait by her car for them, and said discreetly over the earpieces to be careful. She seemed to be in a mood and not to engage with her. He came back in and said she seemed to be huffing about abortion politics, and he and I had a good chuckle about it. Mentioned it to my manager, and she said if I was to see her again, I should call her down and she'd keep an eye. If she said anything else, she'd be barred. Nice to have a manager actually on your side. Definitely not the only Karen story I have from that place, or even any retail place I've worked during my past few years at uni. But it was definitely the one that I was most dumbfounded by. Like others, it was entitlement. This lady just seemed like she was spoiling for a fight. 4. Apparently, a new person moved in below me sometime in December. I'm a 23-year-old woman. Was gone for most of December, so I had no idea until I got back home from celebrating the holidays. My first night back, I had a friend spending the night, Clara. We weren't being too loud, but we were chatting and catching up. She went to her car to grab something, and an old man stopped to talk to her, Richard. He asked her if we were throwing a party. She said no. He then said he kept hearing loud banging sounds and that we needed to be more careful of the people living below us. Okay. Clara got back and told me what happened and asked if I had spoken to Richard before. I told her I hadn't. Soon afterwards, he knocked on the door. So for some context, I'm neurodivergent. A man I don't know knocking repeatedly on my door late at night really freaked me out. I was also wearing pajamas. Because of this, Clara agreed to talk to him for me, which I was thankful for. He went off on her. He said he had been hearing banging sounds for weeks since he's moved in. He keeps hearing weights dropping. I don't lift weights. He hears things drop at midnight and 2 a.m. He even said that he could hear whenever I flushed the toilet. Creepy. Also, I hadn't been home in weeks. At one point during the conversation, my cat tried to escape, and I had to run over and grab him. Richard has left me alone for the past 2 weeks, though sometimes at night while in bed I could hear banging on the walls or floor. Unfortunately, he came back tonight. I decided I was going to tell him once and for all that I wasn't making noise. It didn't go well. I tried telling him that I'm not the one making noise. He said, "Yes, you are. I hear sound and then I see you leave in the morning. Then I hear sound again when I see you come home." And then he described the car I drove. What the fuck? Okay, he's now admitted to watching me, and he knows which car is mine. And I honestly don't know what he is hearing in the morning other than me walking and putting on shoes. I'm not an early riser. I sleep as late as I can, then wake up, get dressed, and leave. I'm not doing morning workouts. He also tried to catch me in a gotcha moment. He said, "Last time I was here, your lady friend said you couldn't come to the door because you weren't dressed. But I saw you come grab your cat." Yes, sir, she was correct. I was wearing pajamas, not clothing I wanted you to see me in. He kept going on about constant banging, saying he needed to be awake at 4 a.m. for dialysis and that he needed sleep. Then he finally left, after saying he's not trying to be a jerk. I'm at a loss. I don't know what banging sounds he's talking about other than me walking, and complaining about me flushing the toilet? Seriously? My cat is 18 pounds, not a beast, just massive frame, and he runs and jumps around when he gets zoomies, so I wonder if he's hearing him. Regardless, the apartment allows pets, and Thunder is an ESA. I should be allowed to walk around in my own apartment and flush my damn toilet without worrying I'll piss someone off. I will no longer answer the door if he shows up, but unfortunately, he's admitted to watching me, so he knows my schedule. If you don't want to put up with footsteps, animals, and toilet flushing, you should not move into a pet-friendly apartment complex. 5. I teach Dutch for a company as a thing on the side. I mainly teach guitar and piano, but during COVID I got in touch with the mom of a friend, and she got me an online job teaching Dutch to people from different countries. It's a pretty cool idea. The government subsidizes these lessons because it helps with people staying here longer and being more valuable to the country. It's not an obligatory course, so only people who really want it go to these lessons, and these lessons are bought by companies who provide them for the employees. I was working for a big, well-known supermarket company, logo with colors similar to IKEA. The first group I had was chaotic. Then they got me around 3 or 4 people I had taught for over 2 years. Teaching them was a lot of fun. I used the book, but also played games with them to help them use words and grammar in different ways. This was all great until I was assigned a new woman. It so happened that she was the only one for this group, so I had to spend 2 hours a week with her. She managed to squeeze all the joy out of this job, and I still haven't fully recovered from that. Her main thing was that she didn't respect me, solely because I was younger than her. Whenever we did something and she didn't like it, she would straight up refuse to do the exercise. Everything needed to be discussed. Everything. Hell, our first conversation, we introduced ourselves and talked about our lives. I mentioned I didn't have kids and wouldn't want any. Her response was that she knows better. We had been talking for 20 minutes. Or if I corrected her on something, she would disagree. I'm a native speaker. Or she would talk about how ridiculous the exercise was. This was mainly when working on pronunciation. A writing exercise wasn't good enough because I wouldn't have anything to do. My whole day of teaching got put under the microscope, which made me really nervous and a worse teacher in general. All the prep I did for the lessons was never good, and in the end, I stopped with preparing because it didn't matter. I also stopped discussing stuff and just agreed to everything she wanted. Her response? "Oh, you must be looking forward to your holiday, you're so much nicer." After a terrible 6 months, she got put with a part of my other group and kept on wreaking havoc. I wanted to put them all in different groups and teams because they were all at different levels. My idea was to go from group to group and let them do exercises so I could spread my attention. She didn't like this and disconnected the video call and made a formal complaint later. I'm glad I don't feel the rage that I felt back then, but this woman was infuriating. The worst part was that this course wasn't mandatory. If she didn't like it, she could have just stopped without issue. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Idiots in the Wild, episode 150. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, do hit the like button. And if you want to get early access to the videos and support the channel, then support me through my Patreon, which is linked in the description. You'll also find a link to the Hellfreezer merchandise store. And if you feel like it, you can leave a tip by clicking on the heart with the $sign in the middle. Don't press the button too hard though, you might tip me over. Okay. I think we have a birthday shout out to do today, and let's see. Yes, we do. Today's birthday shout out goes to Joan. Their birthday is on the 18th, so I'll have to remember to put this up on the 18th. Hope you have an amazing birthday full of happiness and love, Joan. We all certainly deserve that at any time of the year, especially near the start. And if you are busy, you happen to be working or something like that, make sure you take some time later in the week or as soon as possible to celebrate. Okay, before I go, I'd like to sing Happy Birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Joan. Happy birthday to you. All right, and let's move on to today's question and answer of the day. And today's question is: if you woke up tomorrow and suddenly found you had more money than you'd ever need to live off of, would you quit your job, keep working, or get another job, or just spend the rest of your days doing nothing and lounging around doing whatever you wanted? I think I'm one of the lucky few people that actually has a job he really enjoys. Sometimes it does get a little bit stressful, but overall I enjoy it. I mean, any job will stress you out at some point. So I would definitely keep working. Maybe I'd take a few vacations here and there, but I would definitely keep working and making videos of different types. I don't know if I'd stick just to Reddit stories, but we are sort of expanding our horizons a little bit this year. So why don't you let me know what your answers are in a comment below. And speaking of answers, here's today's answer of the day. This came from the last Idiots in the Wild video. And the answer comes from Dust Warden. And they say, I'm going to fudge and answer with a game. And this was about, I think, games you played the most of. And answer with a game I would play if I had more time. The Long Dark is a very realistic game where you're stranded in the wilderness in winter. Looks fascinating, if a bit stressful. Subnautica also looks awesome. Thank you very much, Dust Warden. Okay, with that, I'm gonna head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.